In this brief video, we will be talking about how to apply the invisible stranding technique to other charts. It would be rare for you to find another pattern that has the invisible stranding lines drawn in and some of the other demarcations that we include with working with those charts. So we need to be able to apply them to charts that we will be working with other designs. So here we see a standard kind of Norwegian snowflake design, and you can see that there are a lot of white stitches and background stitches surrounding a bold Norwegian snowflake motif. So how would we incorporate and apply that invisible stranding technique to this particular design? The first thing I do is I start by working from the center of the design out so that the lines are symmetrical to that particular chart. And the reason I do this is so that each repeat of the chart is the same. Otherwise you might have those red lines in different areas on different parts of the chart, and that would be confusing. So I like to work with one repeat and start from the center and work my way out. So I would start by adding the lines every 5 stitches in each direction. As you can see, in most of the chart I have 5 stitches in between, but because we have a 24 stitch count of our chart, I have one that's 4 stitches. That's just fine. They don't have to be the same number, and they often are not. You know, for you to have a repeat that's exactly divisible by 5 or 7 or whatever your stitches per inch is kind of unusual. So you just have to kind of fudge it and make it work. Now that we have our lines drawn in, this is where I start to evaluate it a little bit more and decide, do I really need the invisible stranding technique throughout the entire chart, or can I remove some of those extra stitches at some point in time? So when I look at the lower points on the snowflake, I can see that really the heart of the snowflake, the major part of it, I don't really need those extra lines that are drawn through there. I need them at the bottom because I'm trying to go across that whole white area, but once I get into the blue, I don't really need those lines anymore. So I can remove those in any number of different places at the bottom points. I could take them out here, I could take them out here, I could take them out here, and then what would happen is that line would just disappear on my chart. I would not draw it all the way up. And so what I would recommend is that you have a couple of copies of your chart and you start playing with the lines and where you want to space them, and then start playing with where you want to remove them and add that little X demarcation anywhere you want to remove one of those lines. So what's the next step? Once we've decided on some lines that need to be removed, the next step is to see if we need to add any lines. And you can see at the top of the chart we go back into that white area, and so we're going to want to add some stitches back. So we do that by adding them in the same location as they were before. We're just extending them from where they were, and then we would create those 2 new stitches in between the blue stitches because they will be carried in blue from behind. If you see an area like this where you have, it could go either way. You could take the stitches out, you can add them back in. You need them for a certain number of rows, but you don't need them for the entire area. In a case like this, I would just leave them in and work them as I came to them. Sometimes that's easier than, you know, getting rid of the stitches and bringing them back in. So some things to remember are to draw the red lines about 1 inch apart on your chart. The number of stitches between the lines does not need to be the same, and it really depends on your stitch gauge. So how many stitches per inch do you have in your project? You can add or remove extra invisible stranding stitches as you need to throughout the project, and don't worry about perfection and getting your chart exactly right. You can add and delete as you go depending on your need as you get into the project. And always when you get to one of the extra stitches when you're knitting, you bring the working yarn forward, then the yarn being carried, you purl through the back loop with the carried yarn, you put that yarn back first, and then you put back the working yarn, and then you continue knitting.